Welcome back to our channel. Today's story is about a flight seemed completely normal until the pilot ordered one silent passenger to move. The boarding gate buzzed with the low, impatient energy of travelers who believed they were early while time had already decided otherwise. Screens flickered with flight numbers and destinations. Coffee cups were abandoned half full, and rolling suitcases clicked across the polished floor like nervous metronomes counting down to departure. The flight was nearly full, a long-haul journey carrying executives, families, tourists, and people who preferred not to be noticed at all. Among them was a black woman dressed simply, seated quietly near the window in the forward cabin. There was nothing about her appearance that demanded attention. No designer logos, no visible urgency, no air of entitlement. She carried herself with calm restraint, the kind that came from certainty rather than confidence. Her boarding pass rested neatly on the armrest, untouched since she had sat down. Around her, the aircraft filled with motion. Overhead bins slammed shut. Flight attendants moved with practiced efficiency, smiles fixed, voices steady. Passengers negotiated silently for armrest territory, adjusted seatbelts, and glanced toward the cockpit with a mix of trust and curiosity. To most of them, the woman by the window was invisible, another face in a cabin full of strangers. The pilot entered from the cockpit with the authority of someone accustomed to instant obedience. His uniform was immaculate, his posture rigid, his presence immediately shifting the mood of the aisle. Conversation softened. Heads turned. The plane, moments ago a chaotic collection of individuals, felt suddenly organized around a single point of control. His eyes scanned the rows, pausing briefly on seat numbers, then on faces. There was a reason he had stepped out before pushback, though no one yet knew it. A minor issue, he believed. A procedural correction, something to be handled quickly before departure. His gaze stopped on the woman by the window. From his perspective, the situation was simple. The seat assignment did not align with what he expected. Whether it was a manifest discrepancy, a last-minute change, or an assumption formed too quickly, the conclusion in his mind was already made. The woman did not belong there. The solution, in his view, required no discussion. He addressed her with a tone shaped by hierarchy and habit, the kind that assumed compliance before resistance could even form. Nearby passengers leaned in subtly, pretending not to listen while absorbing every detail. Moments like these were rare interruptions to the monotony of air travel, and curiosity spread faster than turbulence. The woman looked up calmly. She did not rush to respond. She did not search for reassurance from others. Her expression remained neutral, almost observant, as if she were watching a predictable sequence unfold exactly as expected. She glanced once at her boarding pass, then back toward the aisle, making no sudden movements. The pilot waited, impatience tightening his jaw. Time mattered. Authority mattered. From where he stood, this was a test of order, not a question of fairness. He repeated the instruction firmer now, making it clear that this was not a request. A ripple passed through the cabin. Some passengers exchanged uneasy looks. Others assumed there must be a reason. Pilots knew things passengers did not. Procedures existed for a reason. Trust the system. That was the unspoken rule of flight. Still, something about the woman's composure unsettled the atmosphere. She did not argue, but she did not immediately move either. She remained seated, hands resting lightly, posture relaxed. Her stillness felt louder than protest. A flight attendant approached, sensing tension, prepared to mediate. The pilot gestured subtly, signaling that the matter was under control. He believed it was already resolved in principle, even if not yet in action. The authority of his role had always been enough before. The woman finally stood, moving with deliberate grace rather than haste. She did not gather her belongings right away. Instead, she stepped into the aisle, allowing others to see her fully for the first time. Her presence shifted something intangible in the space around her, though no one could yet explain why. Passengers watched closely now. Some felt sympathy, others felt judgment. A few felt relief that the disruption did not involve them. The unspoken assumptions of the cabin layered themselves quietly over the moment, shaping perceptions without words. The pilot turned slightly, preparing to lead her toward another seat, satisfied that the issue had been corrected. In his mind, the system had worked. Order restored, authority reaffirmed. What he did not know was that the woman had flown on aircraft like this for reasons far beyond travel, that she understood the language of aviation not as a passenger, but as a decision-maker, that her silence was not submission, but patience. She followed without resistance, her expression unchanged. The aisle felt longer than before, every step measured. Somewhere behind her, a child asked a question that went unanswered. Somewhere ahead, the cockpit door waited, closed and certain. No announcement was made, no explanation offered. The plane remained grounded, engines quiet, suspended in a moment that felt insignificant to those unaware of what it carried. The pilot believed he was enforcing a rule. The cabin believed it was witnessing a correction. No one yet understood that the flight itself was about to change course, in ways no checklist had prepared them for, and this was only the beginning. The cabin settled into an uneasy quiet as the woman stood in the aisle, no longer hidden by the curve of the window or the anonymity of her seat. The pilot walked ahead, certain the moment would pass like so many others before it. Around them, passengers held their breath without realizing it, sensing that something unresolved lingered in the air. The engines remained off, the doors closed, and time seemed to stretch. The woman followed calmly, each step unhurried, as though she were not being moved, but choosing to move. Her composure unsettled assumptions quietly forming around her. A flight attendant glanced at the manifest again, fingers tightening slightly around the tablet. Something did not align, though she could not immediately explain what felt wrong. The seat number matched. The boarding time matched. Everything on paper appeared correct. She looked up, watching the pilot guide the woman forward, and hesitated. Years of training urged obedience, yet experience whispered caution. She said nothing for now, but the silence between her thoughts grew louder. The aircraft felt smaller, the rows closer, as if the truth itself were compressing the space around everyone inside the cabin. The woman stopped briefly near the bulkhead, not blocking the aisle, not defying instruction, simply pausing. The pilot turned, surprised by the hesitation, his expression tightening with restrained impatience. Passengers nearby leaned forward slightly, curiosity now overtaking politeness. No one spoke. The woman met the pilot's eyes for the first time. Her gaze steady and unreadable. There was no challenge in it, no fear either. It was the look of someone accustomed to rooms where decisions carried. Weight and consequences followed quietly. The moment stretched long enough to feel deliberate. Without raising her voice, she asked a single question, calm and precise, requesting clarification rather than permission. The pilot responded automatically, repeating procedure, authority guiding his tone. Yet the exchange changed the atmosphere instantly. Words remained professional, but something beneath them shifted. The woman listened attentively, nodding once, as if confirming information she already possessed. Around them, passengers sensed a line had been crossed, though no one could say how. It was not the words that mattered now, but the balance between them, tilting subtly with every second. The flight attendant stepped closer, drawn by instinct more than instruction. She checked the manifest again, this time slower, more carefully. A name caught her attention, one she had seen before, but never in this context. Her breath caught, barely noticeable but enough. She looked from the screen to the woman, then to the pilot. Training told her to remain neutral. Reality told her something extraordinary was unfolding. The cabin felt suspended between routine and revelation, as if the aircraft itself were waiting for someone to acknowledge the truth hiding in plain sight. Passengers whispered now softly, speculation spreading in fragments. Some assumed a mistake, others assumed entitlement. A few sensed injustice but did not yet understand its shape. The woman remained composed, hands loosely folded, allowing the process to continue without interference. She did not interrupt. She did not explain. Her patience carried intention, as though she were allowing the system to reveal itself exactly as it was. The pilot, still unaware, felt control slipping in ways he could not define, frustration creeping beneath his professionalism, unnoticed by him but visible to others. The flight attendant cleared her throat gently, signaling she needed a moment. She addressed the pilot quietly, pointing to the screen, choosing her words carefully. His expression shifted from certainty to confusion, then to disbelief. He glanced again at the woman, this time seeing her differently, as though a lens had adjusted without warning. The cabin held its breath. No announcement interrupted the moment. No alarm sounded. The most profound changes, after all, often arrived without noise, altering everything before anyone could prepare a response. The woman said nothing as recognition began to form. She watched the pilot process information that challenged assumptions he had never questioned. Authority, once firm, now felt fragile in his hands. The uniform did not change, but its meaning did. Around them, passengers sensed the turn, the subtle reversal of roles unfolding without spectacle. The air felt heavier, charged with anticipation. Somewhere deep within the aircraft, systems waited for input, for direction, for someone to decide what happened next, unaware that the true course correction had already begun. The pilot stepped back slightly, a movement small enough to seem accidental but significant enough to be felt. The woman remained where she was, neither advancing nor retreating. The flight attendant stood still, understanding now the weight of what she had discovered. No one spoke. The silence carried accountability, reflection, and the first hint of consequence. The cabin, moments ago defined by routine, now existed in a fragile pause, balanced between what had been assumed and what was about to be revealed to everyone on board. The aircraft remained grounded, but nothing else was stable anymore. In that suspended moment, power shifted quietly, not through force or volume, but through truth waiting patiently to be acknowledged. The pilot realized this was no longer about seats or procedure. The passengers sensed a story unfolding they would never forget, and the woman, still calm, still composed, allowed the silence to do its work, knowing that what came next would change the flight far more than anyone yet understood. The silence did not break all at once. It thinned slowly, like fog lifting just enough to expose shapes beneath it. The pilot stood motionless, eyes fixed not on the woman herself, but on the information now echoing in his mind. The flight attendant remained beside him, her expression carefully neutral, though her grip on the tablet betrayed the weight of what she had seen. Passengers sensed the shift without understanding it, the way people sense pressure changes before a storm. Something irreversible had already happened, even if no words had yet confirmed it. The pilot spoke quietly, lowering his voice as if volume alone might worsen the situation. He asked a question meant only for the flight attendant, but the tension carried it farther than intended. She answered with equal restraint, choosing precision over explanation. Names, codes, internal references, the kind of language that existed beyond passenger experience. The woman listened without reacting, her gaze drifting briefly toward the closed cockpit door, then back to the aisle. She did not correct them. She did not hurry them. The truth, she seemed to know, did not need help arriving. A murmur rippled through the cabin. Not conversation, not quite whispers, but the subtle sound of collective attention sharpening. People leaned forward in their seats, some pretending to check phones, others no longer pretending at all. A man across the aisle frowned, sensing that assumptions he had made only minutes earlier were now questionable. A woman a few rows back felt an unexpected unease, not about safety but about fairness. The plane felt like a courtroom moments before a verdict, suspended in anticipation. The pilot looked at the woman again, this time with a different posture entirely. Authority had not vanished, but it had transformed. His shoulders were no longer squared in command, but angled in consideration. He asked another question, this one directed to her, framed politely, carefully. She answered simply, confirming nothing beyond what was necessary. Her voice was steady, unremarkable in tone, yet it carried finality, the kind that came from familiarity with outcomes rather than fear of them. The flight attendant swallowed, then nodded, as if confirming the last missing piece. She stepped slightly aside, creating space where none had existed before. The pilot took that space instinctively, though he did not yet understand why. He glanced toward the front of the aircraft, then back toward the cabin, realizing for the first time that the audience mattered. Whatever happened next would not remain private. It would be witnessed, remembered, and retold long after the flight landed. The woman adjusted her jacket subtly, a small, human gesture that contrasted with the magnitude of the moment. She looked around the cabin briefly, meeting no one's eyes for long, acknowledging the presence of others without inviting judgment. Her expression carried neither triumph nor resentment. If anything, it suggested disappointment, not personal but systemic, as though she had seen this moment before, in different forms, different rooms, different altitudes. The pilot exhaled slowly. Training did not cover this. Checklists did not prepare him for authority turning inward, forcing reflection rather than action. He realized that his earlier certainty had not been rooted in procedure alone, but in assumption. The recognition settled heavily. Around him, the aircraft hummed faintly, systems alive, waiting for input, unaware that the most critical recalibration was happening among the people, not the machines. A senior flight attendant approached now, drawn by instinct and the unusual stillness of the cabin. She took in the scene quickly, reading expressions, posture, silence. The tablet changed hands. The confirmation was instant. Her eyes widened just slightly before professionalism reclaimed control. She said nothing at first, but the acknowledgement passed between crew members without words. The hierarchy they all understood had just revealed an exception none of them expected to encounter in this way. Passengers felt it. The shift was undeniable now. Something significant had been uncovered, and it was no longer possible to pretend otherwise. A man near the aisle straightened uncomfortably, replaying the pilot's earlier tone in his mind. A young woman near the back felt a sudden, quiet admiration she could not yet explain. No one cheered. No one gasped. The moment demanded reflection, not reaction. The pilot spoke again, this time choosing words with visible care. His posture changed as he addressed the woman, respect replacing command. He acknowledged the mistake without naming it directly. A subtle admission shaped by professionalism and humility colliding. The woman listened, nodding once, accepting the acknowledgement without celebration. She did not interrupt. She did not escalate. The power of the moment lay in restraint, not exposure. The senior attendant quietly instructed another crew member to pause, boarding procedures entirely. The aircraft remained grounded, but now by choice, not delay. Somewhere beyond the cabin walls, schedules ticked forward, unaware that this flight had entered a different timeline altogether. Inside, passengers sensed they were witnessing something rare. Not dramatic, but meaningful. A correction not of logistics, but of perception. The woman finally spoke again, her words measured, her tone calm. She did not introduce herself fully. She did not need to. What mattered was not her name, but what it represented. Responsibility, ownership, accountability, extending far beyond this single aircraft. She reminded them, gently, of standards, of expectations, of the purpose behind procedures meant to protect dignity as much as safety. The pilot listened. Truly listened. The cabin listened too. In that moment, the flight was no longer about where it was going, but about what it stood for. The reveal was not a declaration, not an announcement, but an understanding settling into place. And as the engines remained quiet, one truth became impossible to ignore. This flight would take off eventually, but not before something far more important had landed. The pause that followed did not feel empty. It felt deliberate, like the stillness before a decision that could not be undone. The cabin, once restless with anticipation of departure, now existed in a different state entirely. Passengers were no longer counting minutes or checking watches. They were watching people, watching posture, tone, restraint, watching what accountability looked like when it was no longer theoretical. The pilot stood quietly, hands resting at his sides, no longer leading the moment but participating in it. The uniform he wore had not lost its authority, but it had gained something else: context. He understood now that procedure without reflection could become something dangerous, not to the aircraft but to the people inside it. The realization was not comfortable, but it was necessary. The woman remained composed, yet something subtle had shifted in her expression. Not satisfaction, not victory, but resolve. This was not about recognition. It never had been. It was about alignment between values spoken in boardrooms and values practiced in confined spaces where power was most visible. She had allowed the situation to unfold not out of passivity, but purpose. Correction required exposure, and exposure required patience. A quiet instruction passed between crew members. Boarding remained paused. The cockpit door stayed closed. The aircraft waited, not for clearance, but for closure. Passengers sensed that whatever came next would define the flight more than any destination. Announcement ever could. The pilot spoke again, this time addressing the cabin. His voice was steady but different, less performative, more honest. He did not explain details. He did not offer excuses. He acknowledged a misjudgment and reaffirmed the standards. expected of everyone wearing the uniform. The words were simple, but their impact was profound. Silence followed, not awkward, but respectful. Some passengers felt discomfort. Others felt relief. A few felt something close to pride, though they could not quite name why. They had witnessed accountability not forced by outrage or spectacle, but chosen in the open. It was rare and it mattered. The woman listened without reaction. When the pilot finished, she nodded once, signaling acceptance, not absolution. Accountability did not erase harm, but it allowed movement forward. That was the difference between correction and consequence. She did not seek apology as currency. She sought change as outcome. The senior flight attendant stepped forward, professionalism intact, voice calm. She confirmed procedures were back on. Track and thanked passengers for their patience. Her words carried new weight now, grounded in something authentic. The cabin felt lighter, not because the issue had disappeared, but because it had been addressed. The woman returned to her seat, the same one she had occupied before. There was no announcement explaining why. There did not need to be. The act itself was the message. She sat down, adjusted her seatbelt, and looked out the window once more. To her, this was not a victory lap. It was a checkpoint passed. Around her, passengers settled back into their seats, though none of them felt quite the same as before. Some replayed the moment in their minds, questioning assumptions they had never realized they carried. Others felt a quiet admiration they would struggle to articulate later. A few felt unsettled, not by the woman, but by the recognition of how easily authority could misstep when unchecked. The pilot returned to the cockpit. The door closed softly this time, not as a barrier, but as a boundary respected. Inside, he sat for a moment longer than necessary, hands resting on controls he had mastered long ago. He thought not about altitude or weather, but about judgment, about how leadership was not proven in moments of control, but in moments of correction. When the engines finally began to hum, the sound felt different, familiar yet earned. The aircraft taxied slowly, deliberately, as if acknowledging the weight of what had just occurred. Passengers felt it too. The flight was moving forward, but with a recalibrated compass. As the plane lifted into the sky, there was no applause, no dramatic release, just quiet understanding, the kind that settles deeper than noise ever could. People stared out windows, closed their eyes, or simply breathed, carrying the moment with them in ways they would not fully understand until much later. The woman looked out at the clouds, expression calm. She had not come to teach a lesson, but one had been learned. Not because of who she was, but because of how she chose to be. Power had revealed itself not through command, but through restraint. Far below, the airport shrank into distance. The flight continued on schedule now, but transformed. Somewhere in the cabin, a child asked a question, and this time it was answered softly. Somewhere else, a passenger typed a message they would later delete, realizing words were insufficient. The aircraft moved steadily toward its destination, carrying more than people and luggage. It carried a reminder that dignity does not require announcement, that accountability does not require spectacle, and that sometimes the most important corrections happen before takeoff. By the time the seatbelt sign turned off, the moment had already become memory. But it was the kind that lingered, the kind that changed how people watched, listened, and decided. The flight landed hours later without incident, but everyone on board arrived changed.